The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Tudors Dynasty Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Larson, and today I'm very happy to welcome back to the show again, Dr. Emma. Emma, welcome back.
Hello, Rebecca. Happy birthday to the Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been like a hot minute since you've been on the show. I think it's been at least a month.
I've been kind of busy, Rebecca.
Yeah. What's been going on?
Well, let's start with the weather in Minnesota. It's been cold. It's been cold in Minnesota. That's the first thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm a lot at home. I'm very, very busy. How about you? Have you noticed the cold lately?
Well, I mean, most recently it wasn't too cold. We had quite a few days where it was above
I don't
freezing.
remember those days.
I made a point to be outside those days because it's very rare that you get days like that in January or February. So yeah, we've been kind of lucky lately, but now we're in a cold stretch, aren't we?
To all the listeners, I love the way Minnesotans always compliment the weather. Find a way to compliment the weather in the winter in Minnesota. It's just triggering, but okay, well, I'll take it. I'll take it. It was nice for a couple of days.
We have to stay sane somehow, don't we?
We do. I think it's probably Mother Nature like, okay, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just yeah. But we're back, baby. And I think it's gonna snow. This
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth, Emma.
I don't know. I brought it up. I think I'm traumatized about the weather in Minnesota. Yeah. That's one thing. So that's, it complicates things sometimes when you want to go outside, when you want to do your errands. I ran an errand the other day and I thought, well, that's what it feels like to go up the Himalayas. So yeah, that's been taking some time. And then, me, I'm always very busy.
Always busy, always busy. Well, I just have to say, recently on social media, you've created quite the uproar with with the discovery that you've made, and we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to talk about. Well, that's why you're here. So
talk about it.
Okay, bye. See you, Dr. Emma.
No, we're only kidding. We'll talk a little bit about it, but ongoing research is important to honor its times. It's just an exciting thing, right? So yeah.
It is. Well, the other exciting thing is that you are going to be heading up an exhibition. I can't even talk right now. You're going to be heading up an exhibition at the British Museum Library.
Yes, the British Museum. I'm sure you've heard of it before, Rebecca. Well, before we go into that, which is very, very exciting, as everyone can imagine, I did announce that I will be the residential fellow at the Yale Center for British Art this fall.
Yes.
I can't even tell you how honored I am. Well, you had Dr. Gemma Field here the other day, didn't you?
Yes.
She did an amazing episode. She has been such a champion of my work too, and I just can't wait to be working with these guys. And I mean, you know me, I'm already like trying to figure out all these things there, and I have a couple of very, very interesting leads. I'm not gonna, give them away. So Dr. Emma is known for giving things away, so let's timing is everything. But I can't even tell you how honored I am that I'll be in New Haven, Connecticut. I've never been to that area of the United States. I've heard it's kind of near to New York and things like that. So I'm getting excited. And just this museum is such an amazing place. It's reopening after an amazing, they're redoing the whole, I believe the whole ceiling outside and inside. Well, a whole revamp of the museum. They have such an amazing collection. Guys, go and follow them. They're doing very interesting videos of their portraits, all sorts of things. They have all sorts of very interesting talks coming up. It's just a very interesting place, right?
Right.
Yeah. If you go into their website and look in, you can type in Horn Boots and maybe find out some things there. Holbein and find out some things there. Even Jean Clouet, these very, very famous Renaissance portraitists that I'm studying because of my work studying miniature portraits. Back in 2022, I gave a conference at the Prado Museum where I first announced that I believe that the Susanna Horenboot was indeed the portrait painter in the Horenboot family. And ever since then, it's all gone a bit crazy because of the combination of those things, right? She would be a very early portraitist, a woman, uh, introducing Renaissance portraiture into England. Just a hero of mine, really. And that is all tied into my work on Catherine of Aragon, of course. Woo! Yes, the name came up finally, right? And just, guys, how misunderstood she has been, because everyone is thinking that she's this traditional queen that is old-fashioned because she's a Catholic. And my work, at least what I see every day when I study her, is this trailblazing woman that changed England forever. Not just artistically and culturally, which is what I focus on and what I'm a specialist in. But I mean, in my dissertation, I also talked about how she changed the army. I mean, she was the one to sign England's entry into the League of Cambrai, and the consequentially having a whole armada, a fleet of boats constructed for this to assist her father, when Henry's only a teenager, really. So it's she's just a powerhouse. It's just the lack of, I think, the lack of interest in that part side, her rivalry with Anne Boleyn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And overall, the lack of use of Spanish sources in Tudor books is just appalling, really. So I think there's going to be a change. I see there's a change. I'm so happy for that. I have publications going back 15 years. So I mean, I hope I can get in there cited sometimes. Sometimes I do, rarely. Maybe now I will a bit more. And that's why I do this work, to disseminate my work, what I've done already, what is published. So again, thank you for giving me a voice in this. And it's all connected, really. And this is all connected to the research project I work in. Arte, poder y género. Can you say this? I'm not gonna put you.
Don't even try.
Art, power, and gender. Right? We are the art, power, and I'm the international outreach coordinator. I can, explain in English. It's fine. So in art, power, and gender is a research group focused at the University of Murcia. I don't know how to pronounce it in a different way. Murcia in Spain. Beautiful city, beautiful people, even better researchers. And they're led by Noelia García Pérez, who's now, she's the scientific director of the El Prado Femenino, and she's my mentor and my idol, really. She leads this research group, and we have 2 research grants projects to study portrait medals in the Spanish monarchy, but how those are spread to other courts. And that's why Tudor England comes into play, because as we know, Mary I is the granddaughter of Isabel of Castile and Fernando of Aragon. So her construction of her image of power is deeply connected to the Spanish court and what they've done before, and her mother's patronage too, right? And this I'll reference more Dr. Peter Stifel, because he's this expert in Mary's imagery. So just all the projects are really connected. What I can announce, and it's very, very exciting, is there will be a first book on Queen Mary I's artistic patronage that I will be editing in the series Queenship and Power in Palgrave Macmillan, where Dr. Peter Stifel and other leading experts in Mary I will do a first approach to Mary's artistic patronage. So now we're going to get a clearer vision of how Mary took on her mother's patronage to create her own image as someone who went from princess to bastard, back to lady to, and then queen regnant. So all the projects are connected, really. I know it looks like it's very all over the place, but it's all women's power and construction of the image of power. How these women are creating propaganda because they don't have presidents, taking what the men had done, but transforming it in something new, so they get power not only because they're legitimate heirs to these men, but because they're women, it's very difficult to achieve. So it's very interesting to see that someone like Mary chose, and Catherine of Aragon chose women many times to do these depictions of them. So sounds pretty exciting. It is, isn't it?
It does sound very exciting. We also always love championing women in history as well. I think it's so important for us to give them a voice.
Yes, it is. And also women becoming professionals, right? Like not just queens. And I talk nonstop about queens all day. But those are the women that are more visible in this time. But how extraordinary is it that someone for their talent gets recognized by a queen and is like, oh, come to England. So I have a forthcoming book chapter on the recruitment of Susanna Horenboot and Lavina Turnlick by Catherine of Aragon and Mary Tudor coming up this year too. So it's very exciting. I think it's going to give a big important plot twist to the art history world in England.
Okay, so
that's a big statement. Oh my God.
I was like, okay, so let's talk even bigger plot twist. Okay, maybe it's not even a plot twist, right? We're talking about powerful women in history.
Yeah.
Women who influenced history. We have to go to Anne Boleyn now, Dr. Emma, and we have to talk about Anne Boleyn and Image, and well, let's just go there and talk about, eventually then work that into your discovery.
Well, I know this is a highly interested, there's a very big interest in this topic. And I think it's a legitimate interest because she's arguably the most famous queen of England for some, queen consort, right? We're talking about consorts now. But her daughter's arguably the most famous queen regnant, Elizabeth I. So, I mean, she is at the very start of, I would argue, and I'm a foreigner, I'm not English or British, so this is just from looking from outside. She's at the core of the birth of, in many ways, British identity, with the Reformation and Henry VIII. And Henry VIII is just so famous that she's part of the Six Wives and all that. And then she has a very interesting story because she's not of royal status, yet she is capable of overthrowing a queen regnant that is has the best pedigree in Europe, right? Catherine of Aragon, who was loved by her subjects and very, very highly respected by everyone in Europe, including the Pope, all the humanists, everyone. So I think this is why Anne Boleyn is so interesting. What is interesting about Anne Boleyn, extremely interesting, is that we don't have a clear image of her in our brain, right? Why? Like we have for Henry, and everybody, he's looking at me, he's behind Rebecca, he's always there. For the people who are not viewing this, she has a poster of Henry. And I've said this before to provoke me in the podcast.
I do. And to be honest, when you're watching this video back, he's cropped out, so you're going to think Dr. Emma's making stuff up.
No. But he's there, right? You can confirm this.
Yeah, I can confirm, yes.
Oh, it's only for my eyes. Thank you, Rebecca.
It's just for you, Emma.
It's just a marketing strategy to get Dr. Emma talking. Okay, I get it. No, but the reality is that we have a very clear image of Henry VIII because of Holbein, because of the portraits that Holbein painted of him, because he painted a very important mural in Whitehall that everybody saw for a long time. Excuse me. Talking about Boleyn is just giving me a scratchy throat. Just a second. Maybe I'm nervous.
Well, Holbein was the master when it came to the Tudors. He is the one that we look at and we say he gave the face to the Tudors, didn't he?
We always say that. That's true. I think you're very right. But it's because really Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon have something in common that is very important. They both fell out of grace. And they were both not really independent from Henry. They depended on him. So the same thing that happened to Catherine of Aragon happened to Anne Boleyn, right?
Yeah.
Once she fell out of grace, everything that belonged to her that was marking her queenship, especially because Henry married someone else, right away.
Yeah.
Imagine how would it be to have a new queen and all the Anne Boleyn falcons and letters all around. That was the first thing that Henry VIII went for when Catherine of Aragon fell. The first thing Henry VIII went for was the pomegranates. Why? Because everybody knew they were Catherine's symbol. The same happened with Anne Boleyn. And what is more significant of the portrait, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you remember someone's face forever. So,
Right.
yes, all of these things disappeared. When we go to the inventory of Henry VIII's goods, when he dies, there's not a single mention to a portrait of Anne Boleyn.
Because they
And he
were all
has
destroyed.
or Catherine of Aragon. He did have a little miniature with Jane Seymour. They did have portraits of Isabel and Fernando, of Mary of Hungary, of Charles V, of Francis I, Eleanor of Austria, all of them, guys, but not Anne Boleyn or Catherine of Aragon. So what is that? Not of other wives. And the miniatures are private images. So if he did have a little jewel with pictures of him and Jane Seymour, that was more probably a thing to remember her by than something he would display in Whitehall, where I think that all the Holbeins were displayed. Right?
Oh, in Whitehall.
Yes, Whitehall Palace was a place that Henry reconstructed with Anne Boleyn, and she was very important in this reconstruction. And then that's where he exhibited all the portraits that he had gathered. I published a book article 2 years ago on this. It hasn't been picked up because it's in Spanish. I'm very sad about that. But it's called The Portrait Galleries of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. So what I was able to prove is that Anne Boleyn helped to reconstruct Whitehall, but what was exhibited there, we have two different inventories, the 1542 and the 1547. So 5 years prior to his death and the year of his death, which is great, right? You get just because you get a still picture of everything he owned on the time of his death, that's pretty major. If you compare the 1542 inventory of Whitehall to the 1547, he hasn't added many portraits. So that means that during the time of Catherine Parr and other wives, I get lost with the wives sometimes. There's no additions to the portrait gallery. There's very big.
Wow. Yeah.
And they're all of them, the majority are relatives of Catherine of Aragon and relatives of Anne of Cleves. Everybody can draw the conclusions they want from that. There was a second place where he had portraits. It was St. James's Palace, which is still active today. And that was a very important place because that's where government really happened and where you would receive people. By the way, listen to this. This art collection that was much more than the portraits that Henry VIII had in Whitehall was so important and major. Then when Mary was queen, she gave this palace to Philip of Spain so he could receive international ambassadors there. I'm sure he was saying, here's my abuela, Isabel. Here's my abuelo, Fernando, and I am the king now. This is my father, Charles. I am studying many of these portraits. You don't even know how many of them are connected to the Prado Museum. So I have a long-term research project that has gotten recognition lately of the connections, and they're all going back to Catherine and Mary. That's why I did sorry, I'm not talking about Anne Boleyn, but I think this is important. Why is this important? Because we have two key images of Anne Boleyn, right?
Mm-hmm.
A portrait medal, we all know about it, and we know it's her because it has the letters AR, so Anna Regina in Latin, most likely. Her motto, the most happy, right? And an image of her, but this portrait medal that is in the British Museum has been smashed or something has happened to it. So even though it's a likeness of her, very similar to the portrait medals, and that's why the connections between portrait medals and miniatures and the private images, very similar to the model of it. So the outline, right? The way the person is displayed. It's very similar to a sketch by Holbein they also have in the British Museum that has an inscription that says in Latin, Anne Boleyn decapitated in London on the 19th of May, I think, was it? Yes, 1536. But that inscription is from the 17th century. Not from the 18th. I believe that the ones in the Royal Collection Trust are from the 18th century. This is earlier. So it must be by a different hand, right? I have a theory. I'm not going to say anything about it. Don't ask, please. Okay, so we have that image, right? But that image is not a portrait medal like others. It doesn't have, so portrait medals usually are a propaganda tool, right? And they usually have two sides. This one only has one side. So and it's a cast medal. So what they believe is this is a model that, because Anne really didn't have that much time as queen, she had a long time as in a relationship with Henry, but as queen, when she really could start her propaganda, let's say legitimately, was very short. So a lot of these things were done, but not quite, developed. Like we have tons of portrait medals of Mary I in the Prado Museum, in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, and in the British Museum, and everywhere of Mary and Philip, for example. Not of this portrait medal of Anne Boleyn. There's only one of these. There's only one. It's in the British Museum, and somebody has smashed it, so it is a likeness of Anne Boleyn, but somewhat not quite, well, we can't make out if it's her features in her face, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
There is other representations of Anne Boleyn done by Holbein, but they're not representing her features as a person. There's a sketch for her coronation, for example, and you can go and Google it. It's also there, and it looks very schematic, right? It's not very good for her likeness. However, this sketch that it has an inscription saying it is her was, there was a study by David Starkey to identify this as Anne Boleyn. Since then, that has been put into question and disputed because there's other likenesses of Anne Boleyn, like another sketch by Holbein, identified as Anne Boleyn in the Royal Collection Trust, recently featured in the Holbein exhibition, that very convincingly argued that it could be her. So now we have a conflict. Is this the same person? Are these two? Now we have two? Are these? So with all of this, this is ongoing research. So it's very exciting, but at the same time, we have to be cautious because now we have two possible images. Well, researching this sketch of the one in the British Museum, I started studying it because of this project studying portrait medals in the University of Murcia, and this medal of Anne Boleyn that is her only likeness, because I'm studying the construction of the image of power from Catherine of Aragon to Mary I. So the wives fall into that category, right? And to be honest with you, Rebecca, I was studying this sketch. They have a great tool at the British Museum. I haven't seen the sketch in person yet, but they have the best magnifying glass tool you could ever imagine. And I just started falling in love with this sketch. I was like, well, I don't know if it's Anne Boleyn, but I love it, and looking at it, and because I'm very interested in Holbein too, and looking at it, and I thought, well, I've seen in portraits of Catherine of Aragon, like the sit-down in the Kunsthistorisches Museum that everybody loves. It's now labeled as Mary Rose, but we all think it's Catherine. I think they'll change that sometime. There's a little Gothic C. So in the same place, there was a little thing that I saw, right? And in the Holbein sketch in the British Museum, with the inscription that it's Anne Boleyn from the 17th century. And I thought, oh, he's marking where the pearls go, right? Or some sort of, and then I was like, wait a minute. And I zoomed in, and just like clear as day, I saw the word Anna spelled there. Anna. And honestly, I gasped. I wasn't sure what to think of it. I was at first I thought it can't be. It can't be that nobody has seen this before. I was convinced it was Anna. I'm still convinced.
It does look like it.
It does look like it. Um, I thought, could it be him doing a little design so he remembers later what he wants that part of the dress to look like? But so I left and I went to gather my thoughts and freak out a little. And I thought, well, you know what? Clear mind is always better. So I thought to do something else. When I came back, it was still there looking at me. And I was convinced right away. And it all made sense, right? It's like, there is an inscription that says it's her. It looks like the portrait medal, blah, blah, blah. All the pieces kind of fell together. And ever since, it's been a while now since I discovered this, but ever since I've been quite obsessed with it.
Yeah, it was like hidden in plain sight.
Yes, to me, I would say it's because Holbein's a genius, really. The sketch is so good, her face is so beautiful. The headdress, I was looking a lot at the headdress because it reminded me of Jane Seymour's headdress right away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had seen Catherine of Aragon with similar headdresses, not in very known images. So, possible depictions of because now it's all like, whoa, what is a picture of Anne Boleyn and what is a picture of Catherine of Aragon? I think I have a theory that I can share that many times someone had a picture of Anne Boleyn, but wanted a picture of Jane Seymour or of Catherine of Aragon, and they knew to put together different elements in the 17th, 18th centuries. Because they're all like mixed up later on in prints, in 17th century artworks. So I've spent a lot of time in the British Museum database because I haven't been able to see anything, there yet. I will be going to England next month. I'm very excited for that.
Yay!
Yay! But for now, I'm just really looking also at other Holbein objects in the British Museum because there is a book called a jewelry book of Holbein in the British Museum, and there has been discoveries of designs where it says Henry and Catherine. There's H's and A's, but there's also a lot of references to Mary Tudor, Mary the First, future Mary the First of England, and I think they're all connected. Remember Holbein, there's also another sketch of Holbein of Lady Mary Tudor, of Mary the First. She's wearing a very similar headpiece too.
Yeah, she is.
And she pays for a portrait of herself in 1544. Remember that there's in her privy purse expenses, she's paying for a portrait of herself. What I have argued in my new book chapter is that if you look at that picture in the National Portrait Gallery, it's very similar to the miniatures, the style, the lettering, the inscription, the way she's displayed. And it says she's the daughter of the king. And, I think this is Mary's preparing her own image. I argue that was given to, that she commissioned that portrait because listen to this, in 1543, I think it is. Simon Thurley is a reference for this. This is not my research. Henry decides to bring back Mary and Elizabeth, right? And put them back in the succession. Well, before that, but put them back in the succession. He actually has a whole new building constructed in Whitehall for Mary. My argument is that picture of Mary is related to that, because that's the same year she pays for that portrait, she gets this new palace in Whitehall where all the portraits of her abuela Isabel, her abuelo Fernando, all these people, her fiance Charles of Habsburg, all these people are. So I have a theory that it's Mary who's largely in charge of all of this, because my research time and again shows that it's usually the women who exchange portraits. It's just we have we think it's Henry because when he's looking for a wife, right? He sends Holbein to Anna. But the other times, it's Claude of France who sends portraits to Catherine of Aragon. It's Margaret of Austria who sends a portrait painter to Catherine of Aragon when Mary Rose Tudor is betrothed to future Charles V. It's Elizabeth of York who most probably sends the pictures of Arthur, because the first time a picture of a Tudor is given to a Spanish ambassador, it's after the Queen in Greenwich, after Elizabeth of York has a big party for them, and they're given pictures. So I think this is, to me, the most exciting thing I found out in my research about Mary. I just think Mary's going to live her year, and I'm glad to contribute to it. And I'm also glad to have found the Anne in the sketch, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all part of the same idea. It's the construction of the image of power of these women. It's complex, but it makes sense when you see it as a whole, you know? I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense, Rebecca.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned like Henry VIII had this one time he was like, hey, let's send Holbein to Germany to paint a picture of my wife. And suddenly everybody just assumes after one time that he's the guy. And he
sends Susanna Hornboot later, and she becomes the head of the household of Anne of Cleves. So, I mean, Henry's not that dumb, you know? He's a very, very smart guy. I never doubt that. He's just not as smart as his wife's. That's all I'm saying.
He's not a dumb guy. He's just not that smart.
Exactly. He has smarter women around him. Which you know, when he's being good to his women, he usually has a good time and it's all fine. But when he's not, well, sorry, mate, but it's not going to be easy. These are powerful women too, you know? Very powerful women. So, I mean, it's not just Catherine and Anne Boleyn and all this. Think about Mary of Hungary, who is the most powerful woman in Europe, and Henry sends Holbein to her to paint Christina of Denmark in the National Gallery in London. She allows that, but she only allows him to be 3 hours with her, and she's like, yeah, let him paint, but she's not going anywhere. You know, and she's all over the little channel between England and London. And I have read many letters where they're saying back and forth from Mary's court, Mary of Hungary's court, to Spain, that they have to help Mary Tudor's cause no matter what, because she's a Trastámara and by extension a Habsburg. Boom.
Mic drop.
I'll give you another one then. Erasmus of Rotterdam once mentions that one of More's daughters, the picture has been received, and that Mary of Hungary is really interested in meeting her and knowing who she is and blah, 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 blah. So Mary is trying to reach out to the survivors of the massacre of the Catholics that Henry did, and to the most prepared women in England. I know a lot of people think Anne Boleyn was the most educated woman in her generation, but the most educated women in that generation were Mary Tudor and the More sisters, I'm afraid to say.
Well, don't be afraid if it's...
No, I'm afraid to say it's true.
Yeah.
They knew Greek, Latin. They were humanists in their own right. That's not to say that Anne Boleyn was not extremely intelligent to see that she needed also to be the face of a cause, right? Mm-hmm. The Catholic cause was taken over by these extremely powerful, very influential, very educated women. So I see why she would turn to reform to help her cause, to become queen, right? Especially when Henry's like, okay, we're going to do this. Call the Pope. We're done.
Right. Yeah. That whole time period, you know, We don't know for certain, right? There's nothing to definitely lead us down the path to say this is what happened and why it happened this way, but we can make assumptions. Anne clearly had a lot invested into her relationship with Henry VIII for all of those
You
years
think so?
before.
Poor woman.
I mean, that is a long time.
Well, and think about this. For the longest time, she's waiting for this relationship, right? And he's pushed her. He's pushed her to the limit. And she's young too. And I mean, he's the king of England. Like, I'm not laying this on her whatsoever. And then when nobody really likes her because she's pushing away the most loved queen who has done so much for England, who fought for England in 1513 from an invasion. So it's very difficult position to be, and he keeps pushing her and pushing her and pushing her. And then I think another thing that happens, and any woman can relate to this, as soon as she gets married and she starts to get pregnant and all that, it's just she's fearful for her babies too, as any person would be. And then she's just put in a position that Henry should have never put her in.
Yeah.
That's what I think. You don't do that. That's an abuser's. That's how abusers work.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a tough situation for Anne to be in.
For such a young woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's all, I mean, and when I say this, I mean it. And Henry's at fault. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have pushed a young woman like that, put her in that position. He shouldn't have cast away his wife. He should have just accepted that his daughter was going to succeed him as it happened. Hey,
Yeah.
Henry.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you call Henry and tell him? Do you have his phone? Can you tell him?
I don't, but I can just turn around and talk to him.
Yeah. Henry, both your daughters were better queens than you. I want you to know.
Yeah.
And I think Mary wasn't, she's very infamous, but it's just she didn't have time, really.
Yeah.
Right? And Elizabeth, I mean, she's the most famous. Do you think she's the most famous monarch or Henry's the most famous monarch?
I think Henry is, to be honest.
More than Elizabeth the First?
I don't know, maybe. That's what I think.
I think it, as a historian that likes to project into the future, I think the most famous British monarch of all time will be Elizabeth II.
Yeah, that could be. I think that's a fair one.
So, and then number two, I don't know. I'm torn between, and then you can see I favor women, either Queen Victoria or Elizabeth I. To be honest. Queen Victoria's, I'm learning so much about her because she was very interested in Spanish art. So, yeah, and her husband was a great patron of the arts, of Renaissance art and all that too. So, quickly making my way through all the queens.
That's right. Well, Dr. Emma, normally our episodes are super long, but today I feel like we have covered.
I said too much?
No, I feel like we have covered everything that we need to cover on what you have coming up in the future and this Anne Boleyn discovery. And if people want to follow along on your journey, where can they follow you?
Oh, I hope they don't follow me home.
Yeah, I hope so too.
No, I mean, you can always find me around. I mean, my famous friend in the Tudors Dynasty podcast, you can always find me around there because I don't have such a big following. But yeah, on Instagram, I'm on X. I'm really trying my best to do better and get a website and all those things, but it's difficult when you're a one-woman show, Yeah. So more than that, probably. I don't know.
Follow her on social media. She's everywhere.
Please. Yes, please. And overall, I'm going to England next month. I'm going to Spain.
Yeah.
We have our annual conference in Murcia, and this year is going to be focused on portrait galleries. So see how it's all connected?
Yes, this is so exciting, Emma.
So I get to talk you can sign up for that. So you can send academic works. We take academic works in English too. So feel free. We have a call for papers. And also I'll be participating in one of the roundtables talking about elements And this is why it's all tying in here. Dynastic elements in portrait galleries. This is why I am obsessed with looking at all these portraits and sketches to find little clues that help me to, really represent the Tudors in that panel discussion, because it's going to be tough. There's some very important people there, so I need to up it up and bring all my new discoveries into that.
Well, Dr. Emma, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Thank you, Rebecca. Have a great day, guys.
And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.